So the first objective in this part will be to actually interpret and understand what is the concept of slope. Then we're going to go towards the applications in finding the equation of line, finding the midpoints, then solving the linear equations graphically. And of course, one of the major important part is like finding the bisectors, finding the equations of parallel and perpendicular lines. So let's first understand the basic concept of slope. So now when we have, let's say, a line on a coordinate system, now let's say the 2 points that we have on the line are, let's say, x1 and y1, and the second point is x2 and y2. So when you want to find out the slope of this line, the slope is simply defined as, slope is basically for this line segment will be y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So for example, if this point is 1 comma minus 1 and the second point is 2 comma 4, the slope will be, I can take this as x1 and y1 and this is x2 and y2. The slope is going to be y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now this is going to be 4 minus of minus 1 over 2 minus 1. That's going to be 5 over 1, which is going to be 5. So the slope of this line is basically, in this case, is 5. Obviously, this is not to the scale, or it's not to the same kind of system here, but this is the general way of finding out the slope. Now also, if you have a grid, what we can do is, let's say if I have the grid given, let's say you already know the grids and the distance. So suppose, let's say there are 2 points here, and let's say this is here, and I want to find out the slope of this. So lots of times what we use is the concept of rise and run. So rise and the run between these 2 points. Let's say this is, if I select 2 points on the line, this distance is 1 and this distance is 2. So rise over run is also the formula. So rise over run. So it will be 1 over 2. Here the slope, we can straight away, we can just look at the grid lengths and divide that. So this is a simple way to find it out. And just remember that a line, when it is inclined horizontally, like there is no, it's not making any angle with the x-axis, these lines will have slope 0. So slope of this line is going to be 0. Any line that has negative slope, basically it will be something like this. These are the negative slopes. Any line that is inclined towards left hand side, it's like you're climbing, it is going to have positive slopes. So these are positive slopes and these are negative slopes, and these are with the 0 slope. Any line that is vertical is going to have an infinite slope, or we can say undefined slope, or the slope is really large. So this is the general idea of finding out the concept of slope. Now, before we go ahead and apply to any applications, there are 2 concepts that we need to definitely understand. So when there are 2 line segments that are parallel, so if there are 2 line segments that they're parallel, their slopes are going to be the same. So if this is, let's say, L1, line L1, this is line L2, and if I'm finding out the slope of their lines, these lines, and if they're parallel, so the slope of the lines are going to be the same. Slope of lines will be same. And if the lines are perpendicular, so let's say if this is one line, and if this line that I'm drawing here is perpendicular, means they're crossing at right angle, then their slopes, let's say this slope is m1, this slope is m2, then both the slopes will multiply, m1 times m2 will be -1, you can say, or you can say m2 is negative reciprocal of m1 and vice versa. So for example, in this case, if the slope of this line is 3, the slope of the other line also will be 3 here. The slope of this line will also be 3. But in this case, if this line slope is 3, this perpendicular line slope will be -1/3. So that's important thing, which will take you all the way towards like DP or AS level courses. Just remember that if 2 lines are perpendicular, their slopes are negative reciprocal. Now, just taking one more example, let's say if the slope of this segment is, let's say, 2/3, a -2/3, then slope of this line will be reciprocate this. So it'll become 3 over 2 and negative 3 over 2 and the negative of that. So it'll be 3 over 2. The slope of this line L will be 3 over 2. So that's about finding slopes and their interpretations. And now talking about the midpoint. Now, when you have, let's say, 2 points in space, let's say x1 and x2, and then let's say this is x1, y1, and x2 and y2. Now, if I want to find out the midpoint joining these two segments, I mean these two mid coordinates, then this is somewhere it's going to be the midpoint. So midpoint will be x1 plus x2 by 2, comma, y1 plus y2 by 2. So that's going to be the midpoint formula, x1 plus x2 by 2, comma, y1 plus y2 by 2. Now let us say I have the coordinates are negative 1 comma 2 and 5 comma 8, and I wanted to find out what are the midpoints for what is the coordinate of the midpoint. So in this case, just take the average of the x coordinate. So midpoint will be average of x coordinate will be negative 1 plus 5 over 2, comma 2 plus 8 over 2. So that becomes 4 over 2, comma 8 plus 2 is 10 over 2. So this is going to be 2 comma 5. So that's going to be the slope of, I mean the midpoint of the given situation here. In some cases, what you might know is that, let's say they will give you the coordinate. Let's say this one of the coordinate here is negative 1 comma 2, and this midpoint I know is, let's say, 2 comma 5, and I might be asked to calculate what is the x and y coordinate of the other point. So in such cases, obviously what we do is, suppose you already know the midpoint, what we do is take the midpoints of these two. So negative 1 plus x upon 2 is, let's say, 2 here, and if I solve for x, negative 1 plus x equals to 4, and that gives me x is 5. So the x coordinate of this point is 5. Now similarly, now you take the midpoint of 2 and y, and that should be 5 because here the midpoint is already given. So 2 plus y over 2 equals to 5. So that becomes 2 plus y is 10, and you get y is basically nothing but 8. So this coordinate is 5 comma 8. So this is like just a reverse way or the backwards working I did in order to find out the general equation. Now let us just go back to the next application, that is we have the distance formula. So in the distance formula, when we're finding out, so distance formula is given by, so when you have the 2 points, let's say on the coordinate system, x1 y1 and x2 y2, x2 comma y2, actually this distance when you find out, and this distance, so this is nothing but x2 minus x1 if you see, and this distance that you have is y2 minus y1. So if I apply Pythagoras theorem, it will be x2 minus x1 the whole squared plus y2 minus y1 the whole squared. So that's about the distance formula. Now let's say, give an example, if I have negative 1 comma 2 and this is, let's say, 5 comma 3, and I wanted to find out what's the distance between these 2 points. So distance will be 5 root of x2 minus x1, so 5 minus of minus 1 the whole squared plus x2 minus x1, which is 3 minus 2 the whole square. So this part is going to be 6 squared plus 1 squared, which is nothing but root of 37. So this will be the distance in between these two coordinates. Now lots of times you might get the question on like coordinate geometry, which is let's say if I have, for example, verification of a square or something like that. So let's say A, B, C, and D. And they'll ask you to find out, like the coordinates will be given, and they want to ask you to verify what kind of shape or what kind of geometrical figure is that. So obviously you have to use the distance formula along with the basic properties that you have. Now coming back to our E part is finding equation of a line. Now, first thing is what we need to be comfortable is writing the equation of line that are horizontal. So let's say if any line that is horizontal, it's going to have the same, let's say this cuts at 1, this cuts at 2, 3. The equation will be y equals to 1, this equation is y is 2, y equals to 3. This is like an identity of the line. Now, for example, if this y is -1, this line will be y equals to negative, let's say -2, and so on. Any horizontal line will be written in that format. Any vertical line when you have, so any vertical line will be like x equals to 2, x equals to like 3, something like that. But if my equation is like, let's say a line which is inclined at certain level, then you have three different forms you can write equation, but we'll just touch base upon the two forms. First form is called as the slope intercept form. We remember most commonly form used is slope intercept form. So here, if a line is inclined, it will have certain slope, which is obviously, which we just did, and c is nothing but the y-intercept. So c is y-intercept, where the graph cuts the y-axis. Like here, for example, this is cutting it, let's say this is 3, for example, then y-intercept is 3 straight away. So now y equals to, let's say, mx plus c is general the equation of the line. Now let us do a question where I have to find out equation of line in y equals to mx plus c form, which passes through, let's say 1 comma negative 3 and 2 comma 5. So first thing that you'll do is you're going to find out the slope of this line. So slope of this line is going to be 2 minus 1 over, this is going to be 5 minus of minus 3, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So x2 minus x1. So the 8 over 1, that's going to be 8. So slope of this line is 8. So what we do is here, we're going to launch y equals to 8x plus c. Now still my equation is, I haven't got the c value. So plug in x as 1 and y as negative 3. So you get the c value. So negative 3 equals to 8 times 1 plus c. So c you get is negative 11. And my final equation that will be there is y equals to 8x minus 11. So basically this will be a line that will cut somewhere here at 0 comma negative 11 y-intercept, and its x-intercept will be when I plug y as 0. So it will be 8x equals to 11. So x will be 11 over 8. So this will cut x-axis at somewhere 11 over 8. So it'll be something like this as a line. So this is just a basic example of how do we find out equation of line in slope and intercept form. And the next thing that we need to do is we could have done the previous question is something called a slope point form. Slope point form, which is like you don't need to find c value separately. Now, if I look at that form is actually y minus y1 equals to mx minus x1. Y minus y1 equals to mx minus x1. So m that you see here is nothing but the slope of, let's say, line, and x1 and y1 is one set of the point on the line. So now if I look at the previous question, we already got the slope is 8. So I'm not going to find it. So let's say I had given the point is 1 comma negative 3 and 2 comma 5. So what's the equation of line that passes through 1 comma negative 3 and 2 comma 5? So what you can simply do is you can just plug in y1 here. Let's say I can select this is x1 and y1. So plug in y minus y1, which is negative 3, equals to m we got is 8, x minus x1, which is 1. So it becomes y plus 3 equals to 8x minus 8. Bring in this 3 other side and it becomes 8x minus 11, which is the same way we got the previous answer. What you could have taken is you could have taken this as x1, y1 also. So x1 comma y1, if I do here, it will be y minus 5 equals to m, that is 8 x minus 2. So y minus 5 equals to 8x minus 16. And if I bring 5 other side, it will become 8x minus 11. So again the same thing. So this is how you find out the equation of line in slope point form. Now coming back to the next key concept that we have to work on is basically finding out the solution of the equation graphically. So let us first understand how do we solve the equations graphically. So now for this, I'll just use a digital platform to explain it better. So consider, let's say there are two equations. Now, first equation that we have is y equals to, for example, 3x plus 5. That's my first equation. And second equation that we've got is y equals to, let's say, negative 4x plus 2, or negative 4x plus 2 here. So now you can see that these two are intersecting at this point. I would try to make it some, let's say, coordinate which is giving us a decent answer. Maybe let's say take 10. Even here it's decimal answer. Let's solve the equation and see if the answer is coming the same. So what we do is, if I solve this equation manually, like y is 3x plus 5 and y is negative 4x plus 10. So basically I'm finding out where these two equations are intersecting. Now, if you want to use elimination method, you could just substitute this y out here. So it'll become 3x plus 5 equals to negative 4x plus 10. And bring in this 4x here, so it'll become 7x equals to, then bring in this 10 here, so it'll be 5 here, so it'll become 5. So x is 5 over 7, which is 0.714. So the actually, wherever the lines are intersecting, that's the general solution of those simultaneous equations. Where the lines are not intersecting, basically the lines are parallel, we call it as no solutions. Where it's not going to intersect, so there will not be any common points. So this is how you use equations graphically, or like you use the general coordinate system or the equation using graph to solve the simultaneous equation. So let's take now the next concept that we have. So our next concept that we have is something called as perpendicular bisector. Now, perpendicular bisector. Now, before we go ahead to do the perpendicular bisector, what I would like to do is, I would like to give any line in just standard form. Let's say any line in 3x plus 5y equals to something like 7. Now, this line, you sometimes are asked a question like, okay, make y the subject of the formula. So if I make y the subject of the formula, be 5y equals to 7 minus 3x. And y will be 7 minus 3x over 5. So what do we get here is, basically, if I make y the subject, like isolate each term, it will be negative 3/5 x plus 7 over 5. So the slope of this line that you get is, slope is negative 3 over 5, and y-intercept is 7 over 5. So this skill is required. Now, there are questions which will definitely use this particular thing. So now first let's take an example where you have to find out equation of parallel line and perpendicular line. So let's say if I have an equation is 2x plus 3y equals to 7, and you have to find out equation of another line that is parallel to this line, parallel to, let's say this is line L1, parallel to L1, and passes through 1 comma, let's say 3. So this is the question here. So it's like this, as you have been given a line and you have to find equation of second line that passed through 1 comma 3. So what we're going to do is, here obviously to find out equation of a line, you need the slope. Okay, so you do 2x plus 7 3y equals to 7. So get y will be 7 minus 2x over 3. So if you make isolate them, so 7 over 3 minus 2 over 3x. So the slope that this line has is basically, the slope is negative 2/3. So the slope of this line is negative 2/3. Now slope of any line parallel to this line will be also negative 2/3. So slope of the second line, that is L2, which we are finding out, will be, slope of this line will be L2 will be negative 2/3. So you do y equals to negative 2/3 x plus c. And now you're going to plug x coordinate as 1 and y coordinate as 3. So when I plug x as 1 and y as 3, what do I get is basically the general solution for, the c value. So 3 equals to negative 2/3 plus c, and that gives us 3 plus 2/3, which is equals to c, which also comes out to be 11 over 3. So our final equation of this line, which you'll notice, is negative 2/3 x plus 11 over 3. That is going to be the equation of this line parallel to this given line. Now, if I wanted to find out, let's say perpendicular instead of parallel, if I wanted to find out a perpendicular to this line, so it's like this. So it's like perpendicular to line L1. and passing through this point. So obviously we are going to use the concept of slope. So let's say here, the slope of this line is negative 2/3. So first line is 2 negative 2/3. Now when you find out the slope of second line is just going to become 3/2, negative reciprocal. So negative reciprocal, when two lines are perpendicular, their slopes are negative reciprocal of each other. So this is negative 2/3. If I reciprocate, it will become negative 3/2 and take negative of that. So 3/2. So now finding out the C constant is going to be almost a similar one. We're just going to find out the C value out here as well. So this is going to be 3/2x plus C. Plug in the x and y and same coordinates and you get 3/2 times 1. So C is 3 minus 3/2, which is going to be 6 minus, so this will be 3 2s are 6, 6 minus 3 is 3/2 again. So 1.5. So your C value in this case, your final equation is going to be y equals to 3/2 x plus 3/2. So that's how you find out equation of parallel and perpendicular lines. Now the last concept is to find out the equation of perpendicular bisector. Now let us say that there are two coordinates. A is 1 and negative 1 and B is 3 and negative 5. And what I want to do is I want to find out the equation of perpendicular bisector of the line joining these two. So I want to find out what is the equation of this line that bisects or passes through the midpoint of these two lines. So obviously we can see that if I can find out the slope of line L1, and that gives me the slope of line L2 also, because if I take negative reciprocal because the lines are perpendicular, so that will give me the slope of line L2. Now first here you find out slope of line L1, which will be y2 minus y1. This is L1, I would say. This is L2. So y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. We're going to get is negative 5, negative of negative 1 over 3 minus 1. So this becomes negative 5 plus 1 over 2, which is negative 4 over 2, which is negative 2. So the slope of this line is negative 2. Now y equals to negative 2x plus c is going to be the equation of L1, but I'm not finding out equation of L1. I'm finding equation of line L2. So what you do is you find out the slope of second line, find slope of L2. So slope of line L2, which is going to be half, negative reciprocal, and then you do y equals to half x plus c. Now, to get the c coordinate, I know that there has to be one point on the line. So I would find out the midpoint first. So midpoint will be 1 plus 3 over 2. So that's the midpoint coordinate, comma, negative or negative 5 over 2. If I take the average, so it's going to be 2 comma negative 3. Now next up is plug x as 2 and y as negative 3 here. So negative 3 equals to half times 2 plus c, and this cancels. So c, where is negative 4? That's the y-intercept of this bisector. So equation is going to be half x minus 4. So that's going to be the equation of perpendicular bisector. Just to sum it up, find out the midpoint, find out the slope of the line, original line, make use of that to find the bisector, and then bisector passes through the midpoint and use that to get the C value. So that's all in the equation of line.